Okay, students, um, this topic is on data representation and probability. So, in high school, you have had some exposure to statistics. So, we're going to start off with the first learning outcome, which is showing you how to actually represent data, either using graphics or either numerical methods, as in tables. And the second learning outcome will focus on measures of central tendency, where it involves mean, mode, median, and you'll also be exposed to standard deviation and variance. Third learning outcome will actually um, explain about events and probabilities. And the fourth and the fifth learning outcome are also related to events and probabilities. It just focuses on the mutually exclusive events and also independent and conditional events. Statistics actually is the science of collecting, organizing, and presenting data to make the data being more effectively useful to make decisions. Yeah. So descriptive stats is meaning you summarize the data in an informative way. Inferential stats is methods used to determine something about the population on the basis of a sample. Okay, so for example, you make conclusion of a population based on a smaller group of sample. Population is the entire individual which are actually of interest of a particular object, and sample um, is a part of a population, a subset of a population. The first learning outcome, um, I would like to focus on variables. So what are basically variables? Variable is an item of interest that can take many different type of numerical values. So in statistics generally, variables are qualitative and also quantitative. For foundation level, we will focus on the quantitative part of the data, which is discrete and also continuous. So this chapter is on data representation and probability, and the next two chapters of stats we will actually focus on discrete distribution and also the continuous distribution, which is the normal distribution. We will not actually look into qualitative data for this foundation syllabus. Yeah, so our focus is just on the quantitative data. So moving on, I will just want to explain to you the table that shows what is actually quantitative data and what is qualitative data. So for example, quantitative data is something you can quantify, like height, shoe size, length of your fingernails, and you can actually measure and write it down in numbers. So how do you collect this data? You can use survey, you can use experiments, you can use interviews, observation, and so on. And there are two major groups of quantitative data which are ungrouped and grouped. So we will look into how do we calculate mean, mode, median, standard deviation, and variance for these two ungrouped and grouped data later on. And whereas qualitative data is a data that you cannot represent with numbers, so they are more subjective. For examples, like softness of your skin, um, how softly do you actually dance, or the color of your eyes. The color of your eyes, human eye color, you can't really represent in category, like as in with numbers. Yeah. And methods how to collect qualitative data is a bit more subjective, where you involve focus group, observation, interviews, or you can actually use newspapers and so on. So moving forward, we will focus on quantitative data. So how do you actually represent quantitative data? I'm very sure in high school you have actually used the frequency distribution table, also the cumulative frequency distribution table, or another graphical representation, the third method. So when you have graphical distribution is a bit more popular because it's a very effective way of actually presenting your data, as in your viewers will be very clear, or your spectators will be very clear of what you're trying to actually communicate through data. So firstly, you can use bar graph, bar chart, pie charts, histograms, and also stem and leaf display. I'm very sure the first three, the bar graph, pie chart, and the histogram, you can actually draw it on your own. Stem and leaf display, some of you might not have had exposure to stem and leaf display, but however, I would just like you to have an introduction to it. So in order to learn about stem and leaf display, please view these two videos, which actually is from Khan Academy. So to give you an understanding of how to actually plot and also read stem and leaf display, if you have any question related to these two videos, you can ask me in next week's week 5's tutorial. Before we start the tutorial, I will actually allocate time for you to ask questions related to stem and leaf display. So please do watch these two videos so that you understand further about stem and leaf display. These are some of the methods that you actually have been using in high school to actually represent quantitative data, which are like bar graph, histograms, pie chart, and also number lines. Yeah. Okay. So moving